Hi all, in this lab, let us understand how to create a Lambda destination, okay? And we will also combine event bridge rules and Lambda destination and state functions also. So let's understand how the end-to-end architecture looks like. Let's get started. So we have a couple of event buses. The default one is the default event bus, and we are creating two event buses. One is the orders, second one is the inventory event buses. And from rules perspective, for orders event bus, there are two rules, rule 1 and rule 2. Okay. And for inventory event bus, there will be one rule. Okay. Now, so with respect to the targets, we have three targets. One is the step function, second one is the Lambda, the third one is the CloudWatch log groups basically, right? Now, let us see the connection. So in the orders event bus, the first rule is connected to the step function. Okay. And the second rule is connected to the Lambda. And in the inventory event bus, the rule 1 is connected to the CloudWatch log events. Okay, CloudWatch log group basically. Now let us say we have a custom event which is being sent to the orders event bus, okay, through AWS CLI or through some application. And based upon the event pattern, the rule 1 gets triggered and the step function will be invoked as a part of the matching of the rule. The step function will process the event and will send another event back to the same orders event bus from which it has received the event. Okay. Now, when the new event comes from the step function to the orders event bus, the second rule gets triggered, and this is where the Lambda gets to run. And the Lambda will process the event and sends an event back to a different bus, which is an inventory. And in the inventory event bus, we have one more rule, and this rule is configured for CloudWatch log groups. Okay, so this is how the Lambda is connected. I mean, the Lambda destination is connected to the inventory event bus, which is automatic. Okay, so we don't have to write any code. So just to summarize, we are using two event buses and there are two rules. One rule will trigger the step function which will execute and send an event back to the same orders event bus, and the second rule gets triggered which will send an event to the Lambda. Lambda destination is configured as a for EventBridge custom bus, which is inventory, and when the event comes to the inventory bus, another rule gets triggered in that event bus which will send an event to the CloudWatch logs. This is end-to-end flow for the EventBridge architecture. Now let's go to the source code and see how to implement this in Terraform. So in this lab, let us understand how to implement Lambda destination as one of the event driven architectures. Okay, so what we will be doing is, let us first go to the eventbridge.tf and see what we have created. Okay, first I'm creating an event bridge custom bus, okay, by name orders, and there are two rules. Okay, so one rule is basically using this pattern where source is equal to com.aws.orders and the location has to be EU West and or EU East. So this is one rule, and one more rule is basically for the events for which the orders are already processed. Okay, so here if you see the event pattern, we are only using the detailed type as order processed. Okay, so what does that mean? This is the incoming order and order event, and we are including invoking a step function to process that order, and the step function will send an event back to the same order event bus. Okay, and that event which is coming from the step function as a result of its execution is basically order processed event. So now we wanted to invoke a Lambda for this order processed event which is coming from the step function. So that's why there is a one more rule. So one rule for the plain simple event to invoke the step function, then one more rule to process the event coming from the step function. The output of the step function is an event called order processed, and that will be processed by Lambda. So if you see the targets, so for the first rule the target is a state machine. Okay, and the second rule the target is a Lambda function. Okay, so there are two different targets, okay, and two different rules, not to confuse. So for the first rule, the target is a state machine, and the second rule, the target is a Lambda. Okay, so these are the other policies that we are adding. Attach state machine policy, Lambda policy, and there is one more event bus I'm creating called inventory. Okay, the inventory event bus will be an output from the Lambda. So the Lambda, when it completes the processing, it will invoke a one more event bus called inventory. Okay, so this is the rule, and the rule says that any event coming from this account will be processed by another target called log group, CloudWatch log group. Okay, so this is the configuration for the CloudWatch log group. So if you go down, so there are some IAM policies for various permissions required for this entire architecture to work. So let us go to the so this is a CloudWatch resource policy that is required on the event inventory event bus. Okay, so let's go to the Lambda. So Lambda will have a Python function, and there are some policies I'm attaching it. And the trigger for this Lambda is basically the order processed event bus rule. Okay, so we have to provide that to trigger the Lambda. So every time an event comes into the order um, order bus, the Lambda will be triggered. And the state function code is also we have seen in the past, but just to summarize. So this is a simple function. It will execute, when the event comes and sends an event back to the orders bus. Okay, custom bus. So this is a put events function. Okay, so let us go to the console and see how this looks like, and we'll test it also. So in the console, let's go to the event bus. There are two event buses. One is the orders event bus, and there are two rules. Okay, the first rule is basically for the step function. Okay, and the target is the step function. So this is the step function that will be invoked when the order event bus is getting any events. And there is a second rule for the orders event bus called order processed event rule, and the target for this is basically a Lambda function. So this Lambda function will be invoked when an event comes from the step function, the output of the step function. Okay, now if you go to the one more event bus called inventory, so here the rule is for the CloudWatch log. So any event comes from this particular to this particular event bus, it will be triggering a CloudWatch log group. Okay, now let us send an event first to understand how it works. Okay, so I've already configured event. So if you go to the test events, so you will see the events 3.1 JSON file. So I'm just sending it again. Okay, now let me go to the state function. Okay, so this is my state function. If I just refresh this, so earlier there were two, now there is a third execution. So that third execution basically has this event. Okay, now if I go to the state execution, so this is the event that we have sent. Okay, now this event will be processed by the Lambda. So if I go to the Lambda, so this is a Lambda function, and if you see, the trigger for the Lambda is basically the orders event bus, and the output, the API destination for the Lambda is basically EventBridge. So the input is an EventBridge and output is also EventBridge. Okay, so if I go to the monitor for this Lambda, so if I go to monitor and look for the CloudWatch logs, we can assume, we can understand that if it executed properly, then the event would have come from the state machine. Okay, so so you see the logs, and you see the event data here. Okay, so that means the event is coming from the state machine. You can also see the state machine here and also. So that means Lambda is getting triggered from the CloudWatch event bus rule, the based on the event which is coming from the state function. Okay, now this Lambda will send an event back to an inventory event bus. Okay, that's what we have seen, right? So if we go to the inventory event bus, so any event which comes to this event bus will be triggering the orders CloudWatch log group. Now let us see whether the events are coming to the log group. Okay, so you can see that the logs are coming to this log group. So that means we are able to test the end-to-end flow. Okay, so you can see that it is coming from the event processor Lambda, and all of this data you can see, right? The payload request, all of this. So that means uh, the end-to-end event bridge architecture is working. So let me just recap what we have done so far. Okay, so we have two event buses, the orders and the inventory, and in the orders we have two um, rules. One rule will invoke a state function, state machine workflow that will process the event and send an event back to the orders event bus, and that event will be triggering a Lambda. Lambda will process and send an event to another event bus called inventory. So the Lambda to the event uh, bus inventory is automatic. We don't have to write any code. It's code. It is already integrated at the Lambda level. Okay, and that uh, event which is coming to the inventory is triggering one more rule to the CloudWatch log group. So that's what we're actually seeing here. Okay, so this is how we can use Lambda destinations in the EventBridge workflow.